I never thought my own wedding dress fitting would be the moment my family finally broke me. But there I was, standing on a pedestal surrounded by mirrors, watching my mother's name flash across my phone screen like a warning sign. My name is Marlo. Marley to anyone who actually likes me, and I should have known better than to answer that call. Darling, we need to discuss your engagement party, my mother said, her voice carrying that sugary sweetness that always preceded bad news. There's been a slight development. I caught my reflection wincing as the seamstress pinned another section of ivory lace. Mom, everything's already arranged. The venue's booked, deposits are paid. Yes, well, your sister just got the most wonderful news. She's being considered for junior partner at her firm, and we simply must celebrate properly. The seamstress accidentally pricked my hip with a pin, but I barely felt it. What exactly are you saying? The 23rd would be perfect for Delilah's celebration. I've already started calling people. That's my engagement party date, I said, my voice hollow. You know that's my engagement party date. Darling, be reasonable. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for your sister. You can reschedule your little party for another weekend. The seamstress had stopped working, pretending to adjust something at the hem while obviously listening. I didn't blame her. This was probably better than her usual entertainment. Mom, Jonah's family is flying in from Seattle. We've had this plan for months. Well, they can change their flights, can't they? Delilah really needs this, sweetheart. You know how sensitive she is about her achievements. I closed my eyes, remembering all the times I'd stepped aside for Delilah's needs. My 16th birthday party, downgraded to a family dinner because Delilah had a dance recital. My college graduation celebration, shortened because Delilah was having relationship troubles and needed the family's attention. No, I said quietly. I beg your pardon? I said no. I'm not rescheduling. The silence on the other end was deafening. When my mother spoke again, her voice had lost all its sweetness. Marlo Grant, you are being incredibly selfish. Your sister has had every other moment of my life. She can't have this one. I cannot believe you're being so difficult about this. After everything we've done for you. Everything you've done for me? I laughed, and it sounded slightly unhinged even to my own ears. Name one thing, Mom. One thing you've done for me that didn't somehow end up being about Delilah. I will not stand here and be attacked by my own daughter. When you've calmed down and are ready to be reasonable, you can call me back. The line went dead. I stood there, still in my half-pinned wedding dress, feeling like I was 13 again, small, insignificant, and always wrong. Do you need a minute, honey? The seamstress asked gently. Before I could answer, the fitting room door opened and Jonah walked in, his eyes immediately finding mine in the mirror. One look at my face, and he knew something was wrong. Marley, what happened? I opened my mouth to tell him it was nothing, that I was fine, but what came out instead was a sob. He was across the room in 3 strides, careful not to step on the dress as he took my hand. Your mom? He asked quietly. I nodded, tears falling freely now. She wants me to cancel our engagement party. For Delilah. Again. His jaw tightened, but his thumb kept drawing gentle circles on my palm. What do you want to do? And that was the difference, wasn't it? In all the years of giving way to Delilah's needs, no one had ever asked what I wanted. But Jonah always did. I squeezed his hand, looking at our reflection in the mirror. Me in my wedding dress, him in his worn jeans and favorite blue sweater. Both of us a little battle-worn, but standing together. I want to have our engagement party, I said firmly. And I want to stop letting them make me feel guilty for existing. He smiled, but his eyes were serious. Then that's what we'll do. Together. I nodded, already knowing this wasn't over. My phone buzzed again, probably my mother rallying reinforcements. But for the first time in my life, I didn't feel the need to answer. The Sunday family dinner tradition felt like walking into a minefield. 3 days had passed since my mother's phone call, and now I sat at my parents' dining table, watching Delilah beam as she detailed her potential promotion to an attentive audience. Of course, nothing's official yet, she said, batting her eyes modestly. But Richard, that's the senior partner. He practically guaranteed it. That's wonderful, sweetheart, my mother cooed, reaching across to squeeze Delilah's hand. We'll make sure your celebration is absolutely perfect. I stabbed at my roast beef, pretending not to notice my father's uncomfortable glance in my direction. Jonah's hand found my knee under the table, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. Actually, Delilah continued, I was thinking we could do it at the Grove. You know, that new venue downtown. My fork clattered against the plate. The Grove was our venue, the one Jonah and I had spent months researching and finally booked for our engagement party. That's already booked, I said quietly. My mother's smile tightened. Well, I'm sure they can accommodate both events. It's such a lovely space. Both events. I laughed, but there was no humor in it. You mean the engagement party you're trying to cancel? Marlo, my father warned, using his rarely deployed stern voice. Let's not do this now. Do what, Dad? Point out how ridiculous this is? Delilah doesn't even have the promotion yet. You're just jealous, Delilah snapped, her practiced poise cracking. You can't stand that something good is happening to me. Something good is always happening to you. The world revolves around your needs, your wants, your everything. Girls, my mother interjected sharply. This behavior is completely inappropriate. You know what's inappropriate? I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. The fact that you're trying to hijack my engagement party for a maybe promotion that Delilah might get. The fact that you've spent my entire life making me feel like I matter less than her. That's not true, my father protested weakly. Really? Remember my college graduation? The one you cut short because Delilah was having boy troubles? Or my sweet 16 that turned into her dance recital dinner? Those were different circumstances, my mother said dismissively. You're being dramatic. I'm being dramatic? You're the one who. Enough. My father's fist hit the table, making the water glasses jump. Marlo, if you can't be supportive of your sister's success, perhaps you should leave. The silence that followed was deafening. Jonah stood up beside me, his chair making the same harsh sound against the floor. Thank you for dinner, he said, his voice cold and formal. We'll be going now. As we walked to the door, I heard my mother's voice behind us. This is exactly why we're concerned about your engagement, dear. This sort of selfish behavior doesn't bode well for marriage. I froze, my hand on the doorknob. What did you just say? Your mother's right, Delilah chimed in, her voice dripping with false concern. If you can't even be happy for your own sister, how can you possibly be ready for marriage? I turned slowly, meeting my mother's gaze. The engagement party is happening on the 23rd, at the Grove, with or without you. If you do this, my mother said, her voice low and threatening, there will be consequences. There already have been, I replied. 28 years of them. Outside, the cool evening air hit my face like a wake-up call. Jonah wrapped an arm around my shoulders as we walked to the car. You okay? He asked. No, I admitted. But I will be. My phone buzzed, a text from Delilah. You've always been so dramatic. Don't worry, though. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly why you're really canceling your engagement party. I showed the message to Jonah, who read it with a clenched jaw. She's bluffing, he said, but we both knew better. My sister had always been skilled at spinning narratives that made her the hero and me the villain. Let her try, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded. I'm done playing by their rules. As we drove away from my childhood home, I realized something had shifted. The hurt was still there, but underneath it was something new, something that felt a lot like freedom. The call from Aunt Vivian came while I was reviewing contracts at work. Her voice trembled with that particular brand of family concern that always made my stomach drop. Marley, sweetheart, I just wanted to check on you. Your mother told me about the situation with Jonah. I sat up straighter in my office chair. What situation? Oh, there was an awkward pause. Maybe I shouldn't have called. It's just, well, we're all worried about you. Breaking off an engagement is never easy. The pen I'd been holding snapped in my hand, blue ink spreading across my fingers like a bruise. I'm sorry, what? Lillian said you and Jonah had a terrible fight. Something about him being controlling about the wedding plans? And with everything happening with Delilah's promotion, I closed my eyes, counting backward from 10 like my therapist had taught me. It didn't help. Aunt Viv, who exactly has Mom told this to? Well, she hesitated. It came up at Bridge Club yesterday, and I believe she mentioned it at Uncle Robert's birthday dinner last weekend. And of course, she had to explain why she was canceling the engagement party reservations. She what? The words came out as a whisper, but they felt like they were being ripped from my throat. Oh dear, I've upset you. I just thought. Well, your mother seemed so certain. My phone buzzed with another incoming call, Nolan's face flashing on the screen. Aunt Viv, I have to go. But nothing Mom told you is true. Nothing. I switched calls, my hands shaking. Nolan now isn't. Check your email, he cut in. Right now. I pulled up my inbox, finding his message at the top. It contained a forwarded invitation to Delilah's promotion celebration at the Grove. On the 23rd. My date. Keep reading, Nolan said grimly. The invitation mentioned a special announcement from the guest of honor. At the bottom was a personal note from my mother. We're so pleased to be able to use this beautiful venue now that it's available. Sometimes disappointments lead to better opportunities. I'm going to be sick, I muttered. Want me to kill them? I know people. Well, I know people who've watched crime documentaries. A notification popped up on my screen, another email, this time from my cousin Sarah. So sorry to hear about you and Jonah. Mom said Aunt Lillian is devastated. Then another. Thinking of you during this difficult time. And another. If you need someone to talk to about the breakup. My phone buzzed again, a text from Delilah. Sorry, everyone's finding out about your relationship problems, sis. But maybe this is for the best. You've always rushed into things without thinking them through. I stood up so quickly my chair rolled back and hit the wall. Nolan, I have to go. Where are you going? To fix this. I grabbed my purse and headed for the elevator, ignoring the concerned looks from my coworkers. In the parking garage, I called Jonah. Hey, beautiful. How's your? My mother is telling everyone we broke up. A pause. What? She's telling the whole family are controlling, and we had a huge fight, and that's why she's canceling our engagement party. Which, by the way, she's already done, so she can throw Delilah a promotion party instead. The sound of his slow, controlled breathing told me he was as angry as I was. What do you need me to do? Meet me at the Grove in 20 minutes. Bring our contract and deposit receipts. On my way. As I drove, my phone kept buzzing with messages of sympathy and concern. Each one felt like another nail in the coffin of my relationship with my family. But underneath the hurt was something else, something harder and colder that had been building since that day in the bridal shop. My whole life, I'd tried to keep the peace. I'd smiled and stepped aside and swallowed my feelings because that's what good daughters do. But this wasn't just about me anymore. This was about Jonah, about our future, about the family we wanted to build together. My mother had finally gone too far, and she was about to learn that her dramatic daughter had inherited more than just her stubbornness. I'd learned from the best how to wage war, with a smile. The Grove's elegant facade came into view, and I pulled into the parking lot just as Jonah's truck arrived. He got out, holding a folder of documents, his face set in determination. Ready? He asked as I walked up. I took his hand, squeezing it tight. Time to write our own story. I hadn't planned on going to Aunt Vivian's weekly bridge club, but after 3 days of damage control, I needed answers. The familiar scent of her lemon squares and coffee hit me as I slipped in through the side door of her Victorian home, voices drifting from the sunroom. Such a shame about Marlowe, someone was saying. Lillian says the boy has quite a temper. Well, you know how she's always been. Another voice chimed in, Mrs. Peterson, my mother's oldest friend. So desperate for attention. Remember that scene she made at Delilah's graduation? I pressed my back against the wall, my heart pounding. The scene they were referring to was me having an asthma attack during the outdoor ceremony. Lillian's beside herself, Aunt Vivian added, her voice carrying that familiar note of concern. Says Marlo's been acting erratically ever since Delilah's promotion news. Threatening to go ahead with the engagement party, even though the relationship is clearly over. The betrayal hit like a physical blow. Aunt Vivian had always been my safe harbor in family storms. Now she was not just believing my mother's lies, but spreading them. Did you hear what she did at the Grove, Mrs. Peterson asked, lowering her voice conspiratorially. Showed up with that poor boy, making a scene about contracts and deposits. Delilah was there planning her celebration and had to witness the whole thing. My hands clenched into fists. I'd gone to the Grove to protect our venue booking, which we'd managed to do, thanks to our ironclad contract. Delilah hadn't been there at all. Speaking of Delilah, someone else added, I hear she's bringing someone special to her promotion party. That handsome senior partner she's been seeing. I stepped into the doorway, unable to stay hidden any longer. The room fell silent, 5 pairs of eyes turning to me in shock. Marley, Aunt Vivian stammered, rising from her chair. We weren't expecting. Clearly not, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. You were too busy discussing my failed relationship and unstable behavior. Mrs. Peterson had the grace to look embarrassed, but quickly recovered. Dear, we're just concerned. No, I cut her off. You're just enjoying the show. Let me add to it. I pulled out my phone, scrolling to the photo gallery. Here's Jonah and me yesterday, having dinner with his parents who flew in early for our engagement party. Here's the contract for the Grove, which we still hold. And here's the truth. My mother is lying to all of you because she can't stand that for once. Something isn't about Delilah. Marlo, Aunt Vivian started, reaching for me. Your mother would never. She already has. And you helped her. I turned to face my aunt directly. You were supposed to be different. You were supposed to be on my side. I am on your side. We all want what's best for you. What's best for me? I laughed, the sound sharp and bitter. Do you even know what that means anymore? Or do you just automatically assume whatever my mother says must be right? The room was so quiet you could hear the ticking of Aunt Vivian's antique clock. I looked at these women who'd known me my entire life, who'd watched me grow up in Delilah's shadow, who'd never once questioned the family narrative. You know what? Keep your concern. Keep your gossip. Keep believing whatever stories make you feel better about watching a mother systematically tear down one daughter to prop up another. I'm done trying to prove my worth to any of you. As I turned to leave, Mrs. Peterson called out, Marlo, wait. Perhaps we've been hasty. Save it for Bridge Club next week, I said without turning around. I'm sure you'll all have plenty to discuss. In my car, I sat gripping the steering wheel until my knuckles turned white. My phone buzzed, a text from Delilah. Heard you made quite a scene at Aunt Viv's. Again. Don't worry, I'll make sure everyone knows you're just stressed about the wedding. You know, the one that's actually happening. The message confirmed what I'd suspected. Delilah had orchestrated this whole thing, feeding information to our mother, who then spread it through her social network like poison. I started the car, a strange calm settling over me. They wanted drama? Fine. But this time, I'd write the script. The day before our engagement party, I sat in Jonah's parents' rental house, surrounded by people who actually wanted to celebrate us. The contrast to my own family's absence felt both liberating and crushing. I still can't believe they're not coming, Sarah, Jonah's sister, said as she helped arrange centerpieces. What kind of mother misses her daughter's engagement party? The kind who's throwing a fake promotion party for her other daughter at the same time, Nolan answered, earning himself a sharp look from Jonah. My phone buzzed, another message from Delilah. Hope you're ready for tomorrow. Mom's invited practically everyone we know to my party. Guess they all made their choice about which event matters more. You okay? Jonah asked quietly, noticing my expression. Before I could answer, his mother Patricia walked in with a stack of photo albums. Look what I brought. I thought we could display some pictures of you two at the party. As we flipped through the albums, I noticed something that made my throat tight. In every family photo, every holiday snapshot, every casual moment, Jonah's family was actually looking at each other, laughing together. Present. Oh, this one's perfect, Patricia said, pointing to a picture from last Christmas. Everyone's smiling at the camera. Except us. Jonah finished grinning. In the photo, we were looking at each other, completely oblivious to the camera. My phone buzzed again. This time it was my father. Your mother's very hurt that you're going through with this. It's not too late to reconsider. I must have made some sort of sound because suddenly everyone was looking at me. That's it, Nolan declared, reaching for my phone. No more family drama until after tomorrow. Wait, I said, pulling up my messages. I need to respond to something first. I opened the family group chat and typed, since there seems to be some confusion about tomorrow's events, I wanted to clarify something. Our engagement party starts at 6 p.m. at the Grove. Anyone who chooses to attend Delilah's party instead is making a clear statement about where they stand. I won't be sending any more invitations after this. Marley, Sarah started, but I wasn't finished. I pulled up the photo I'd been saving, the one of Jonah and me at Christmas, lost in our own world while surrounded by people who loved us. I added it to the group chat with a simple message. This is what real family looks like. Your move. The responses were immediate and predictable. My mother. How dare you make us choose? Delilah. Always have to make everything about you, don't you? My father. You're being unreasonable. I turned off my phone. You know, Patricia said carefully, when I first met you, I wondered why someone so bright and loving seemed so unsure of herself. Now I understand. You've spent your whole life being told you're wrong for taking up space. Mom, Jonah warned, but she continued. No, this needs to be said. Marley, honey, I want you to look at these photos.
Really look at them. Do you know what I see?
I see my son happier than he's ever been. I see someone who fits into this family so naturally that sometimes I forget you haven't always been here. My vision blurred with tears. Tomorrow, she continued, people will make their choices. And those choices will tell you everything you need to know about who deserves to be in your life going forward. Nolan cleared his throat. Speaking of choices, I may have done something slightly devious. We all turned to look at him. I might have created a public Facebook event for Delilah's promotion party. And I might have invited some people from her firm, including her boss. Nolan, I gasped. She doesn't actually have the promotion yet. Exactly. His grin was wicked. Should make for an interesting evening. I should have felt guilty. Should have told him to undo it. Instead, I felt something else, something that felt dangerously close to satisfaction. Tomorrow's going to be messy, isn't it? Sarah asked. Jonah took my hand, squeezing it gently. Tomorrow's going to be exactly what it needs to be. Looking around at these people, my chosen family, I realized he was right. Whatever happened at the party, I already had everything I needed right here. My phone lit up on the table, Delilah's name flashing on the screen. For the first time in my life, I let it ring. The call came at 3 a.m, 2 days after our engagement party. My mother's voice was sharp enough to cut glass. Are you happy now? She demanded. Is this what you wanted? I sat up in bed, Jonah stirring beside me. What are you talking about? Don't play innocent. Delilah's been suspended pending an ethics investigation. Her boss showed up at her party expecting to announce her promotion, a promotion she hadn't actually received yet. Do you have any idea what you've done? The room felt suddenly cold. Nolan's Facebook event. I hadn't thought. I didn't. She could lose her job, Marlo. Her entire career could be ruined because you couldn't stand someone else having the spotlight for once. My phone buzzed with an incoming text. Delilah, hope you're proud of yourself. Guess destroying my life was worth it to finally be mommy and daddy's center of attention. Another buzz. A group email from my father to the entire extended family. Due to recent unfortunate events caused by ongoing family conflicts, we regret to inform you that we will not be attending Marlo's wedding. We cannot in good conscience celebrate while one daughter deliberately sabotages another. Mom. I tried again, my voice shaking. I never meant. You never mean to do anything, do you? Things just happen around you, and somehow Delilah always ends up hurt. Well, congratulations. You've finally outdone yourself. The line went dead. I stared at my phone as messages started pouring in from relatives. Each one felt like another nail in a coffin I'd apparently built myself. What happened? Jonah asked, fully awake now. Before I could answer, my phone rang again. Nolan. Marley, I'm so sorry, he rushed out. I didn't think it would go this far. I just wanted to cause a little chaos, maybe embarrass her a bit. They're suspending her, I said numbly. There's an ethics investigation. Shit. He paused. But hey, maybe she deserves. Don't. I cut him off. Just don't. I ended the call, walking to the window of our apartment. The city lights blurred through tears I refused to let fall. We can fix this, Jonah said from behind me. Can we? Because from where I'm standing, they're right. I let this happen. I wanted her to hurt like I've hurt. And now, I press my forehead against the cool glass. I've become exactly what they always said I was. The jealous sister. The troublemaker. The one who ruins everything. My phone kept buzzing. Aunt Vivian. I'm disappointed in you, Marlo. I thought you were better than this. Delilah again. Attached is the official suspension notice. Hope it was worth it. By the way, I made sure everyone at work knows exactly who's responsible for this little stunt. This isn't your fault, Jonah insisted. You didn't create that event. But I knew about it. I could have stopped it. Instead, I sat there and felt glad. The admission tasted like ash in my mouth. What kind of person does that make me? He reached for me, but I stepped away. I need some air. Outside, the pre-dawn streets were empty. I walked without direction, my phone continuing its steady stream of accusations and condemnations. Each message painted a clearer picture of who I'd become, someone who'd let revenge poison everything it touched. A final text from my mother. Delilah's in tears. She may lose everything she's worked for. I hope you're satisfied with what your pettiness has accomplished. Don't contact us again. I found myself at the park where Jonah had proposed, sitting on the same bench where I'd once felt like my life was finally coming together. Now, everything was falling apart, and the worst part was knowing I'd helped it happen. My phone lit up one last time. An email from Delilah's firm. They were requesting a meeting with me to discuss my involvement in recent events. I laughed, the sound hollow and broken in the empty park. I'd wanted so badly to stop being the family victim that I'd turned myself into something worse, the villain of their story. And maybe, I realized as the sun began to rise over a day I didn't want to face, they'd been right about me all along. The law firm's conference room felt like an interrogation chamber. I sat across from Delilah's boss and 2 HR representatives, my hands steady despite the storm inside. MS. Grant, the senior partner began. We understand you have information about the incident at your sister's celebration. Before I could respond, the door burst open. Delilah stormed in, our mother right behind her. You don't get to do this, Delilah snarled. You don't get to sit there and play victim after what you did. MS. Grant. The younger Ms. Grant. The HR director interjected. This meeting was meant to be private. No, I said, surprising myself. Let them stay. I think it's time we all heard the truth. Delilah laughed, that sharp, cruel sound I'd grown up dreading. The truth? You mean how you orchestrated this whole thing to ruin my career because you couldn't stand me getting a promotion? You didn't have the promotion, I said quietly. That's the truth you're running from. I was going to get it. Richard practically promised. I didn't create that Facebook event. I cut in, turning to the senior partner. But I did bring something else. I pulled out my phone, playing the voice message Delilah had left me last week. You think you're so special with your perfect engagement and your perfect fiancé? I told Richard the first already had the promotion. I told everyone, because I knew once I announced it, they'd have to give it to me. They always give me what I want. The room went deadly quiet. You recorded me? Delilah whispered.
No.
You recorded yourself. Every threatening message, every admission, every lie, you documented it all. I just saved them. Marlo, my mother warned, but I wasn't finished. I also have the texts where you admitted to spreading rumors about my engagement being called off. The ones where you threatened to make me pay for not canceling my party. Would you like me to share those too? Delilah's face had gone white. You're lying. Am I? I turned back to the senior partner. I came here today because I wanted you to know something. I didn't expose Delilah's lie about the promotion. She did that herself, by throwing a celebration for something she hadn't earned. By trying so hard to hurt me, she ended up hurting herself. This is ridiculous, my mother interjected. Delilah would never. Check her work emails, I said to the HR director. Check the dates. She started telling clients about her promotion weeks ago, making promises she couldn't keep, taking meetings she wasn't authorized to take. Delilah lunged across the table, but security was faster. As they escorted her out, she screamed, "You've always been jealous, always trying to take what's mine." "No," I said, standing. "I just stopped letting you take what's mine." My mother followed me into the hallway. "How dare you do this to your sister?" "I didn't do anything to her. I just stopped protecting her from the consequences of her own actions." "And yours?" "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm done, Mom. Done being the family's scapegoat. Done watching you enable her worst behavior. Done pretending we're a normal family when we're anything but." "So, this is your revenge? Destroying your sister's career?"
No.
"This is me finally telling the truth. Delilah destroyed her own career. You destroyed our family. And I'm finally free of both of you." As I walked away, Delilah's voice echoed down the hallway. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure you regret this." But for the first time in my life, her threats felt empty. I stepped into the sunshine, where Jonah was waiting by the car. "How did it go?" I took a deep breath, letting it out slowly. It went exactly how it needed to. My phone buzzed a message from Nolan. "Just heard what happened. You okay?" I typed back. "Better than okay. I'm free." Behind us, I could hear my mother and sister's voices, still shouting, still trying to spin the narrative their way. But their words couldn't touch me anymore. I had finally written my own ending to their story, and it felt like victory. My wedding day arrived with the kind of perfect autumn sunshine that feels like a gift. Standing in front of the mirror in my dress, I noticed something different about my reflection. The woman looking back wasn't searching for approval anymore. "Ready?" Nolan asked, adjusting his bow tie. As my man of honor, he'd taken his duties seriously, including intercepting 3 separate attempts by my mother to contact me in the past week. Almost. I touched the empty space where my mother's pearls should have been, the ones she'd promised to every bride in our family. Instead, I wore Patricia's sapphire earrings, something borrowed that felt more like something found. The ceremony space at the Grove looked nothing like Delilah's failed party 6 months ago. Jonah's family filled the front rows, along with friends who'd stood by us through everything. The empty seats on my side told their own story, but somehow they didn't hurt anymore. As I walked down the aisle alone, my father's text declining to attend had been brief and final. I caught glimpses of familiar faces. Aunt Vivian, who'd shown up this morning with tears and apologies, sat quietly in the back. A few cousins who'd chosen to hear my side of the story. Even my mother's best friend, Mrs. Peterson, who'd surprised everyone by publicly defending me after the truth about Delilah's lies came out. Jonah waited at the altar, and the look in his eyes made everything else fade away. During the reception, Nolan clinked his glass for the toast. When Marley first told me about Jonah, she said something I'll never forget. She said, "He sees me." Not the version of her that her family wanted, not the shadow of her sister, just her. Today, we're all seeing the real Marley, strong, loving, and finally, wonderfully free. Later, during our first dance, Jonah whispered, "Any regrets?" I thought about the cost of standing up for myself. Delilah had left the firm, her reputation in tatters. My mother hadn't spoken to me since the confrontation. Family gatherings would forever have a before and after, marked by my decision to stop playing my assigned role. "No," I said honestly. "Just clarity." As the night wound down, Sarah handed me an envelope that had been dropped off at the front desk. I recognized Delilah's handwriting immediately. "You don't have to read it," Jonah said quietly. But I did. Because that's the thing about family. Even when you break free, the threads still tug. "Dear Marley," it began. "I'm starting therapy. Real therapy, not the kind Mom always pushed to fix what she saw as problems. I'm learning about narcissistic family dynamics and golden child syndrome. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it yet. But I am asking for you to know that I see it now. All of it. What they did to you. What I did to you. What we all did to ourselves. Maybe someday we can talk about it. If not, I understand. Be happy, sister. You deserve it. I folded the letter carefully, tucking it into my wedding album. Not as an invitation back into the chaos, but as a reminder of how far I'd come. Dance with me? Nolan appeared, holding out his hand. Your husband's busy teaching your new niece how to dab, and it's getting embarrassing. As we swayed to the music, I caught sight of my reflection in the venue's windows. The same autumn sunshine that had greeted me this morning was setting now, painting everything in shades of gold and possibility. You know, Nolan said, following my gaze, revenge stories usually end with someone winning and someone losing. But this feels different. Because it's not about winning anymore, I realized. It's about choosing yourself. Later that night, as Jonah and I left for our honeymoon, my phone lit up with one final message from my father. Your mother may never understand, but I do. Be happy, Marlo. Be free. I turned off my phone without responding. Some doors needed to stay closed, at least for now. But others were opening, and through them, I could see a future where I wasn't defined by who I'd left behind, but by who I'd chosen to become. And that felt like the happiest ending of all. I stared at my phone, reading the text message for the 5th time, my hands trembling slightly. I know what you're hiding, Marin. We should talk before Everett finds out. My mother-in-law's words glowed accusingly on the screen. My name is Marin, and until 5 minutes ago, I thought the worst thing about my relationship with my mother-in-law was her constant reminders about my food allergies. You know, the subtle jabs about how complicated I make family dinners, or how Everett's ex-girlfriend Camille could eat anything without making a fuss. I was standing in our kitchen, the morning sun streaming through the windows, when the message arrived. The coffee I'd been sipping turned bitter in my mouth. What could Lorna possibly think she knew about me? I'd always been an open book, sometimes to a fault. Hey, beautiful. Everett's voice made me jump. I quickly locked my phone and set it face down on the counter. He wrapped his arms around my waist from behind, and I forced myself to relax into his embrace. You okay? You seem tense. Just your mom being? Your mom, I said, trying to keep my voice light. She wants to talk. Everett's arms stiffened slightly. What about? She didn't say. The lie felt heavy on my tongue, but I needed time to figure this out. Probably another lecture about cross-contamination in her kitchen. He sighed, his breath warm against my neck. I'll talk to her again about the allergy thing. She needs to understand it's not a choice you're making to be difficult. If only that were the real issue. I turned in his arms, studying his face, the kind eyes, the slight worry line between his brows that appeared whenever his mother came up in conversation. Remember when we first started dating, and you told me your mom was a bit protective? He laughed. Understatement of the century? Just a bit. I managed to smile, but my mind was racing. What could Lorna possibly think she had on me? I'd never cheated, never lied about anything important. The only secret I kept was, but no, she couldn't know about that.
Nobody knew about that.
My phone buzzed again. Everett reached for it, but I snatched it first. Sorry, probably work, I said, stepping away. His expression flickered with confusion at my sudden movement. Another message from Lorna. I'm coming over this afternoon. We can discuss the photo I found while cleaning out the attic. My blood ran cold. The attic, where Walter, my father-in-law, had stored boxes of old family photos, including ones from before I met Everett. Before I changed my name. Before I became the person I am today. I need to run some errands, I said quickly, already grabbing my purse. I'll pick up dinner on my way home? Marin? Everett's voice stopped me at the door. You'd tell me if something was really wrong, right? I looked back at my husband, the man who'd loved me unconditionally for the past 5 years, who'd chosen me despite his mother's constant comparisons to perfect Camille, who didn't know that the woman he married had reinvented herself long before we met. Of course, I lied again, hating myself for it. Everything's fine. As I drove away, my phone kept buzzing with messages I couldn't bear to read. Lorna had finally found the ammunition she'd been looking for since the day Everett brought me home. The question was, what would she do with it? The truth about my past wasn't just my secret to keep, it was my survival story. And I'd be damned if I'd let Lorna twist it into something ugly. But first, I needed to know exactly what she'd found in that attic. I pulled into Lorna and Walter's driveway, my heart pounding against my ribs. The familiar colonial house loomed before me, its pristine white exterior masking the tension that always lurked inside. I'd driven here instead of running errands, knowing I needed to face this head-on. Walter's truck wasn't in the driveway. Small mercies. At least I'd only have to deal with Lorna. Before I could reach the front door, it swung open. Lorna stood there in her perfectly pressed slacks and cashmere sweater, a manila envelope in her hands. "I wasn't expecting you so soon," she said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "But I'm glad you came." The formal living room felt cold despite the summer heat outside. Family photos lined the walls, dozens of them tracking Everett's life. I noticed, not for the first time, how many included Camille. 8 years of dating captured in frozen moments, while my 5 years of marriage warranted only 2 frames. "Would you like some tea?" Lorna asked, already moving toward the kitchen. "I bought those special allergen-free cookies you can eat." Though I suppose that was unnecessary, wasn't it? My stomach clenched. "What exactly do you think you know, Lorna?" She set the envelope on the coffee table between us. "I was cleaning the attic last weekend. Walter's been after me for months to organize all those old boxes." She paused, studying my face. "I found something interesting in his old case files. Walter's career as a private investigator. Of course. I should have known he'd have access to that kind of information. Whatever you found." "Sarah Mitchell," Lorna said quietly, and my world tilted. "That was your name before, wasn't it? Before you became Maren Collins." I heard voices in the foyer, Walter's deep rumble and, to my horror, Everett's familiar tone. My hands started shaking. "Mom," Everett called out. "Your car's not in the garage," but the door was open. He stopped short in the living room doorway, Walter right behind him. "Maren, what are you doing here?" "Perfect timing," Lorna said, reaching for the envelope. "We were just about to look at some interesting photographs." Walter stepped forward, his face darkening. "Lorna, don't. She's been lying to our son for years, Walter. He deserves to know who he really married." "Mom, what are you talking about?" Everett moved to stand beside my chair, his hand resting protectively on my shoulder. I stood up, shrugging off his touch. "I can explain." "Can you?" Lorna pulled out a newspaper clipping. "Can you explain why Sarah Mitchell disappeared 10 years ago, right after her father's arrest for running a Ponzi scheme that ruined hundreds of lives? Or why she emerged 3 years later as Maren Collins, with a convenient list of life-threatening allergies that make her seem so fragile and in need of protection?" "That's enough," Walter snapped, but the damage was done. Everett stared at me, his face unreadable. "Maren, I changed my name legally," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "I didn't do anything wrong. My father did terrible things, yes. But I helped the investigation. I'm the one who turned him in." "After taking your share?" Lorna pressed. "The money that disappeared with Sarah Mitchell was returned to the victims," Walter cut in. "All of it. I know because I worked the case." He turned to his wife, disgust evident in his expression. "Which you knew when you found my files. You just chose to leave that part out." The silence that followed was deafening. Everett hadn't moved, hadn't spoken. I couldn't bear to look at him. "I think," Walter said quietly, "you should leave, Lorna.
Take a drive.
Think about what you're doing to this family." "I'm protecting this family," she insisted, but her voice wavered. "No." Everett finally spoke, his tone ice-cold. "You're destroying it. And if you ever try to hurt Maren again, you'll lose me too." I felt his hand slip into mine, warm and steady. But as we walked out together, leaving Lorna standing alone in her perfect living room, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. She'd exposed my past, yes, but she didn't know everything. And the part she didn't know? Those were the ones that could really tear this family apart. The next morning, I found Walter sitting alone at the local diner, nursing a cup of coffee. He didn't seem surprised when I slid into the booth across from him. The breakfast crowd's chatter provided a buffer of white noise around us, making it feel safer to talk. "You knew," I said quietly. "All this time, you knew who I was." He pushed a manila folder across the table, different from the one Lorna had yesterday. "I kept copies of everything. Figured this day might come." He paused as the waitress refilled his cup. "What Lorna doesn't know is that I've been watching her, too." I opened the folder and froze. Inside was a photo of Lorna having lunch with Camille, dated just last week. "She's still in contact with her?" "More than that." Walter's face was grim. "They've been plotting. Lorna's been feeding Camille information about your marriage, your medical conditions. They're trying to prove your allergies are fake." My hands started trembling. "Why are you showing me this?" "Because my wife is about to do something stupid." He pulled out another document. "She's hired a private investigator, not me, obviously, to dig deeper into your past. But she's not going to find what she thinks she will, is she?" I stared at my reflection in the window, remembering the scared 19-year-old girl who discovered her father's crimes.
No.
"She won't." "The money that disappeared?" Walter's voice was gentle. "The part she thinks you stole? I know where it really went. I know what you did with it." "You never told her?" "Wasn't my story to tell." He leaned forward. "But maybe it's time you did. Before she does more damage trying to protect Everett from a threat that doesn't exist." My phone buzzed, a text from Everett. "Mom just showed up at the house. Says she needs to talk to both of us." "Where are you?" "She's moving faster than I thought," Walter muttered, reading the message over my shoulder. "Marin, listen to me. Lorna's not just afraid of losing Everett. She's afraid of losing her identity as his protector. After what happened with Camille." "What had happened with Camille?" I asked. "Everyone tiptoes around it, but nobody ever tells me the whole story." Walter's expression darkened. "Camille nearly bankrupted Everett. Convinced him to invest in her brother's business venture. It was a scam, but she claims she didn't know. Lorna had to remortgage their house to help him recover. That's why she's so paranoid about me being another con artist." I laughed bitterly. "Ironic, considering my background. The difference is you exposed the con. You didn't profit from it." He pulled out one final document, a newspaper article I'd never seen before. It detailed how an anonymous source had helped return millions to the victims of my father's scheme. "You gave up your inheritance to make things right."
My phone buzzed again.
"Everett, Mom's saying something about proof. Please come home." I stood up, gathering the documents. "I need to go." "Marin." Walter caught my arm. "There's something else you should know. About why Lorna's so fixated on Camille." He hesitated. "Camille's pregnant. And she's claiming it's Everett's." The world tilted sideways. "That's impossible. They haven't been together in years." "I know. But Lorna wants to believe it. Because if it's true, then she has a reason to push me out completely." I felt oddly calm, despite the bomb that had just been dropped. "When did Camille tell her this?" "Yesterday morning, right before Lorna found my old case files about you." He gave me a meaningful look. "Convenient timing, wouldn't you say?" I thought about the pregnancy test hidden in my bathroom drawer, the one I'd been too afraid to take. About how everything was about to get infinitely more complicated. "Thank you, Walter," I said, already heading for the door, "for showing me what I'm really up against." "What are you going to do?" I paused, thinking about the other secrets I'd been keeping. The ones that could either save my marriage or destroy it completely. "I'm going to tell my husband the whole truth, before his mother and ex-girlfriend can twist it into something else." I sat in my car outside our house, staring at the pregnancy test I'd finally taken in the diner's bathroom. 2 pink lines.
Clear as day.
The irony of this timing wasn't lost on me, my news versus Camille's claim. But first, I had to deal with whatever scene was waiting inside. Lorna's Mercedes was parked in our driveway, looking as pristine and polished as its owner always did. Through the living room window, I could see her gesturing animatedly while Everett sat with his head in his hands. The moment I walked in, Lorna's voice cut through the tension. Finally. Now we can discuss Camille's situation like adults. There is no situation, Everett said, standing up. Camille and I haven't been together in years. This is ridiculous. She says differently. Lorna pulled out her phone. She has proof of a meeting 3 months ago. My hand instinctively went to my stomach, but I forced it back down. Let me guess, at the Cardinal Hotel bar? They both turned to look at me. Everett's face showed confusion, Lorna's triumph. How did you know that? She asked. I pulled out my own phone, finding the photo Walter had given me. Because I know about your weekly lunches with Camille. I know you've been plotting this together. I turned to Everett. 3 months ago, your mother arranged for Camille to accidentally run into you at that bar. But you never showed up, did you? I was with you, he said slowly. We were at the hospital. Your allergic reaction to the new medication, which your mother knew about, I added. She knew exactly where you'd be that night. Just like she knows my entire medical history now, thanks to the private investigator she hired. Lorna's face paled slightly. How did you? Walter told me everything. I placed the folder of documents on the coffee table, including what really happened with Camille and the investment scam. That's not relevant, Lorna snapped. It's completely relevant. I took a deep breath. Because you're so afraid of history repeating itself that you can't see what's really happening. Camille's lying about the pregnancy, Lorna. Just like she lied about not knowing her brother's business was a scam. Everett picked up the folder, his hands shaking slightly as he read. Mom, you've been meeting with her this whole time? Planning this? I was protecting you. No, he said quietly. You were trying to control me. Again. He looked up at me. What else haven't you told me? This was it. The moment to lay everything bare. Remember how I said I turned my father in? What I didn't tell you is why. I pulled out the final document Walter had given me. The money everyone thought I stole? I used it to repay his victims. All of it. Every penny I inherited, every asset I had. That's why I changed my name, not to hide, but to start over with nothing. Lorna grabbed the paper, her eyes widening as she read. This can't be. Your investigator won't find any hidden accounts or secret wealth, I continued. But he might find the thank you letters from the families I helped, or the testimony I gave that put my father away. I paused, my hand finally resting on my stomach. And now I need to protect my own family. Everett's eyes followed my movement, realization dawning on his face. Marin, I found out this morning, I said softly. Our baby deserves better than this endless suspicion and manipulation. So you need to choose, Everett. Both of you do. Lorna sank into the chair, the paper crumpling in her hands. You're pregnant.
Yes.
And unlike Camille's convenient claim, I can prove it. I turned to my husband. I love you, but I won't raise our child in this environment. Your mother needs help, Everett. Real help. Not enabling. The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, a car door slammed and Walter's voice called out, Lorna? Are you ready to tell them the real reason you're so desperate to keep Everett close? I watched the color drain from my mother-in-law's face, and I realized we were about to uncover yet another layer of this family's carefully constructed facade. Whatever came next would either heal us or break us completely. But at least now, with my own secret revealed, I could face it honestly for my child's sake, if nothing else. Walter's words hung in the air as he entered our living room. The tension was thick enough to choke on, but Lorna's face, that's what caught my attention. Pure fear, something I'd never seen from her before. Don't, she whispered to Walter.
Please.
The pregnancy dinner is tomorrow, Walter said, ignoring her plea. Were you planning to serve that special cake you ordered? The one with the almond flour? My blood ran cold. Everett stepped forward. Mom, it's a family recipe, Lorna said quickly. I wanted to make something traditional to celebrate. To celebrate? Walter pulled out a receipt. Like you celebrated when you ordered that cake for Marin's birthday last year? The one that mysteriously got mixed up with a nut-free version at the last minute. I remembered that day, how Lorna had seemed almost disappointed when I didn't take a bite. How she'd insisted it was safe, but Walter had intercepted the plate. You knew about my allergies, I said softly. You knew exactly what almond flour would do to me. And now, Walter continued, with a grandchild on the way, were you hoping to prove Marin's allergies were fake? Or were you hoping for something worse? Everett's face had gone pale. Dad, what are you saying? I'm saying your mother has been testing Marin's allergies for years. Small doses, watching for reactions. Like some twisted scientific experiment. The room started spinning. All those times I'd felt sick after family dinners, the mysterious reactions that didn't make sense. I had to know. Lorna burst out. Had to prove she was lying like everything else about her. You don't understand. I can't lose him again. Again? Everett's voice cracked. What are you talking about? Walter moved to stand beside his wife. Tell him, Lorna. Tell him about the baby you lost before Everett. About how it broke you so badly you couldn't bear the thought of losing another child. I watched understanding dawn on Everett's face. The brother you told me died of SIDS. That wasn't the whole story, was it? Lorna's composure crumbled. I was allergic to the medication they gave me during the pregnancy. The doctors didn't believe me when I said something was wrong. By the time they listened, she turned to me, her eyes wild. When Everett brought home another woman with mysterious allergies, claiming she needed special treatment, special care. You thought I was faking, I finished. Like you thought the doctors thought you were faking. I had to protect him. By poisoning his wife. Walter's voice was harsh. By trying to prove she's lying, even if it killed her. The doorbell rang, making us all jump. Through the window, I saw Camille standing on our porch, one hand resting demonstratively on her stomach. Perfect timing, I said, feeling strangely calm. Should we invite her in? Let her explain how she's supposedly carrying your child, Everett? Or should we skip straight to the part where your mother orchestrated this whole thing?
No.
Everett moved to block the door. No more manipulation. No more lies. He turned to his mother. You need help, Mom. Real help. Not whatever this is. I'm trying to save you. You're trying to control me. And now you're trying to hurt my wife, my pregnant wife, to prove some twisted point.
He pulled out his phone.
I'm calling Dr. Richards, the same psychiatrist who helped you after James died. Either you agree to get help or what? Lorna's voice was barely a whisper. Or you'll never meet your grandchild. The words seemed to physically pain him. Your real grandchild. The doorbell rang again. Outside, Camille was peering through the window, her face falling as she took in the scene. I placed a hand on my stomach, thinking about cycles of pain and protection, about how fear can twist love into something dangerous. The cake, I said quietly. The one for tomorrow's dinner. Where is it? Lorna's silence was answer enough. Because I'm thinking, I continued, my voice steady despite my racing heart, that we should all have a slice. Together.
Right now.
And see who's really telling the truth about what's inside it. The cake sat in the middle of the dining room table like a bomb waiting to detonate. Lorna had retrieved it from her car, her hands shaking as she set it down. Camille still stood in the doorway, her fabricated pregnancy story forgotten in the tension of the moment. You first, Lorna, I said, cutting a slice. Show us how safe your family recipe is. This is ridiculous, she whispered, but I saw the fear in her eyes. Is it? Because I have my EpiPen right here. I placed it next to the plate. And I've already texted photos of this whole situation to my lawyer. So, if anything happens to me, I let the threat hang in the air. Everett grabbed my arm.
Madam, stop.
You're pregnant. We can't risk. Can't risk what? I pulled away from him. Can't risk proving that your mother has been slowly poisoning me for years? That she was planning to do it again, even knowing I'm carrying your child. I never meant to, Lorna started.
To what?
Kill me? Just make me sick enough to prove I'm lying? My voice cracked. Do you know what it feels like, Lorna? When your throat closes up. When you can't breathe, and every second feels like drowning? Walter stepped forward. I have the receipt from the bakery. The order specifically requested almond flour. Stop. Lorna's voice was barely audible. Please, just stop.
Why?
I picked up the knife again. Isn't this what you wanted? To expose the truth. Camille cleared her throat from the doorway. I should go.
No.
I pointed the knife at her. You're part of this too. The fake pregnancy story? That was supposed to be the backup plan, wasn't it? If the cake didn't work, I needed the money, Camille admitted quietly. Lorna said. Enough. Everett's shout made us all jump. This ends now. Mom, eat the cake. Lorna stared at her son, tears streaming down her face. I lost one son. I couldn't lose another. So, you tried to kill my wife instead? I just wanted proof. She grabbed the fork, hands trembling.
Fine.
I'll show you. Everything happened in slow motion. Lorna lifted the fork to her mouth, but her hand was shaking so badly that crumbs fell onto her blouse. As she swallowed, her eyes went wide. Mom, Everett stepped toward her. Lorna's hand went to her throat. I can't breathe. Walter rushed to her side. Lorna, what's wrong? The medication, she gasped. My allergy to the new heart medication. My EpiPen clattered to the floor as realization hit. The same allergies she'd accused me of faking, she had them too. Different trigger, same result. Call 911, Walter shouted, lowering Lorna to the floor as she struggled for breath. I grabbed my EpiPen and knelt beside her. This will help, but it's going to hurt. Our eyes met, and in that moment, I saw everything. The fear, the guilt, the desperate need to protect what she loved, even if it meant destroying it. I saw myself in a twisted way. How thin the line was between protection and destruction. The EpiPen clicked as I pressed it into her thigh. Lorna's body jerked, her hand gripping mine with surprising strength. I'm sorry, she whispered as the medication took effect. I'm so sorry. Sirens wailed in the distance. Camille had disappeared, leaving the front door open. Everett stood frozen, watching his mother fight for breath on the floor, saved by the very person she'd tried to harm. The baby, Lorna gasped. Will you ever let me? That depends, I said, still holding her hand as the paramedics rushed in. On whether you get help, real help. As they loaded Lorna into the ambulance, I stared at the cake still sitting on the table. One bite had almost killed her. One bite would have killed me. The ultimate proof of truth, delivered in the cruelest way possible. Walter turned to me, his face aged 10 years in the last hour. Why did you save her? Because, I said, watching the ambulance drive away, sometimes the best revenge is forcing someone to live with what they've done. 3 days after the cake incident, I found myself sitting across from Lorna in the hospital's psychiatric ward. The room was stark white, making her look smaller, older somehow. The bruise from the EpiPen injection was still visible on her thigh. Walter's leaving me, she said without preamble. Her voice was raw. Whether from the allergic reaction or crying, I couldn't tell. He's already packed his things. I placed my hand on my stomach, feeling the slight swell that only I could detect so far. Did you ever actually check the ingredients in that cake? Or did you just assume I was lying about my allergies, like you assumed everything else? She flinched. I was so sure that I was manipulating Everett, using my allergies to control him. I leaned forward. The way you used your grief over James to control your family? You don't understand what it's like to lose a child. No, but I understand what it's like to lose everything else. I pulled out an old photograph, me as Sarah Mitchell, standing next to my father at a charity gala. When I turned him in, I lost my name, my family, my entire identity. But I did it because it was right. Lorna's hands trembled as she took the photo. Why are you here, Marin? Because I need to know if you're capable of change. Real change. Not just for Everett's sake, or this baby's, but for yourself. A nurse appeared in the doorway with medication, but Lorna waved her away. I don't deserve another chance. Maybe not, but this isn't about what you deserve. I stood up, moving to leave. It's about breaking the cycle. Wait. Her voice cracked. There's something else you need to know. About James. About what really happened. I sat back down slowly, watching her face crumple. The allergic reaction? It wasn't just the medication. I'd been taking risks, eating things I shouldn't, trying to prove I wasn't really allergic, that the doctors were wrong. She wrapped her arms around herself. When I got pregnant, I kept doing it, kept testing my limits, until understanding dawned, horrible and clear. You blamed yourself for James's death. And then Everett brought you home, with your careful food checks and medical alerts, and all I could see was myself. My weakness. The same weakness that killed my baby. Tears streamed down her face. I had to prove you were faking. Had to prove it wasn't real. Because if your allergies were real, then you'd have to accept that yours were too. I finished. That James's death wasn't because you were weak, but because no one believed you. A sound from the doorway made us both turn. Everett stood there, his face ashen. Mom, how long have you been there? Lorna whispered. Long enough. He moved into the room, standing between us. Why didn't you ever tell me the truth about James? Because I killed him. My pride, my stupidity. No. I cut in sharply. The doctors killed him when they dismissed your symptoms. The same way you tried to dismiss mine. Silence filled a room, heavy with decades of unspoken pain. Finally, Everett spoke. I'm staying with Marin at her house. Walter's moving in with his brother. He paused, choosing his words carefully. But there's a treatment program in Vermont. 6 months, specialized in trauma and anxiety. They have experience with patients who have severe allergies. Lorna's eyes darted between us. You'd let me come back? After everything? Not come back, I said firmly. Start over. But only if you do the work. Only if you face what really happened with James and what you tried to do to me. And the baby? I touched my stomach again. Will know their grandmother when she's ready to be known. Really known, not hidden behind walls of control and fear. As we left the hospital, Everett took my hand. You're either the most forgiving person I've ever met, or the most strategic. I thought about cycles of pain, about how revenge and healing sometimes look remarkably similar. Maybe both, I said. Maybe that's what breaking the cycle takes. Behind us, through the hospital window, I could see Lorna watching us leave, one hand pressed against the glass. This time, when she reached for her medication, she didn't wave the nurse away. 6 months later, I stood in front of the mirror, smoothing my dress over my now visible baby bump. The Vermont Treatment Center had called yesterday. Lorna was completing her program, and they wanted to arrange a supervised family session. Ready? Everett asked from the doorway. In his hands was a small box we'd received that morning from Lorna. I nodded, and he opened it. Inside was a leather-bound journal and a note. I found this in my mother's attic. It explains so much, maybe too much. The journal belonged to Lorna's mother, detailing her own struggles with control and fear. The last entry, dated just before her death, was an unfinished letter to Lorna. My darling daughter, I'm sorry for teaching you that love means control, for making you believe that protecting someone means owning them. She's breaking the cycle, I said quietly, touching the worn pages. Really breaking it. Walter met us at the treatment center, looking years younger despite the divorce proceedings. She's different, he said as we walked in. Really different. The family session room was bright, with comfortable chairs arranged in a circle. Lorna sat already waiting, her hands folded in her lap. The first thing I noticed was her medical alert bracelet, identical to mine. I've been baking, she said after we settled in the center's kitchen. They have protocols for allergen safety. She smiled slightly. Turns out I'm quite good at it when I'm not trying to prove something. Mom. Everett started, but she held up her hand. Let me finish. I've learned something important here. She took a deep breath. Control isn't protection. What I did, to James, to you, Marin, to this family, it wasn't about keeping anyone safe. It was about not feeling powerless. The therapist nodded encouragingly, and Lorna continued. I found these in my mother's things. She pulled out a stack of letters. She did the same things to me that I did to you, Everett. Made me doubt myself. Used my weaknesses against me. Called it love. Her voice cracked. But it's not love. It's fear. I touched my stomach as the baby kicked. Lorna's eyes followed the movement. "I'd like to be part of your child's life," she said softly. "Not as the controlling grandmother who needs to fix everything, but as someone who understands what it means to be different. To need protection sometimes, but not control." "We'd like that," I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. "But we need to know this change is real." "It is." She pulled out another letter, newer. "I wrote to Camille's brother. He's agreed to repay Everett what he lost in the investment scam. It won't fix what I did, using Camille to hurt you both, but it's a start," Everett finished. After the session, as we walked through the center's garden, I found myself alone with Lorna. She stopped by a bench, touching the medical alert bracelet. "You know what the hardest part was?" she asked. "Accepting that you and I are more alike than different. Both of us changed our names, running from our past. Both of us living with invisible threats. Both of us survivors," I finished. "Not victims." She nodded, tears in her eyes. "I named him James because it means supplanter, someone who takes another's place. I was so afraid of being replaced, I nearly destroyed everything trying to prevent it." I took her hand, placing it on my stomach where the baby was kicking. "This little one? We're naming her Hope." Later that night, as Everett and I lay in bed, he asked, "Do you really trust her change?" I thought about the journal, about cycles of fear and control, about how healing sometimes requires walking through the darkest parts of ourselves. "I trust that she's trying," I said finally. "And sometimes that's the bravest thing we can do." On our nightstand sat the last page of Lorna's mother's letter, its final lines hauntingly familiar. "The greatest act of love isn't holding on. It's learning when to let go." The baby kicked again, and I smiled, thinking about names and changes and the future we were building, not despite our scars, but because of them. Some cycles, it turns out, are meant to be broken.